Okay, stream started, recording started. Day is still November 24th. Time is 11 a.m. Starting my last drawing session for the day for my community service art stream. So, yeah, here we go. Before I started, Melody sent me a little something, so I'm just gonna check that out real quick as I get ready here. Hmm. Oh, this is eggnog. Just drinking me some eggnog. I love me some eggnog. I can't drink too much of it though because I'm somewhat lactose intolerant. So if I drink too much, it's gonna make me sick, and then it's just gonna fucking run right through me. Is this gonna? Is this thing gonna play or not? Fuck! Everything just runs so goddamn slow. There we go. The cat was munching on something. He dropped it, and a little puppy was there to pick it up right at the get. All right, back to oh yeah, back to this. This is a commission that I'm working on right now. Um, this is like a fountain that's in the drawing. This is just part of the background. And I've just been getting lost in this fountain. Just like doing all the details here in like Clip Studio Paint. It's just been really fun. And I've just been getting lost and just doing all these details and trying to get this fountain looking all nice and snazzy. It's really, really cool. I love this program. But anyway, back to this. Rah! Just want to see what the preview looks like. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm a little tired because of all the stew I just ate. What the hell's that? Hold on, it looks like there's something here. It was nothing. A vehicle pulled up, but it was for the neighbors. My uncles, where my uncle's staying. The anti-vax uncle, freaking dipshit dumbass. Okay, back to this now. No, this is ew. Anti-twatters. Yes. My uncle is a downright stupid dipshit. He used to come over like whenever he pleased, like didn't even knock. He would just kind of like come in through the door. But with the whole pandemic going on, and then him not choosing not to get and choosing not to get vaccinated, he can't he can't come over like that anymore. And he threw this like stupid whiny bitch fit. He's like, "Oh, it's vaccine is just like it's not real. It's just the government just trying to control you." He's like, "Friggin' you stupid ass! Like, no one wants to control your dumb ass, freaking idiot." Just you can stay unvaccinated. Just don't fucking come over to the house anymore. But he's like one of those stupid conspiracy theory nut cases. Freaking idiot. If he wants to be mad, then be mad. Just be mad not in our house if you're going to be unvaccinated. So him and my stepdad aren't on speaking terms anymore. And they're brothers too. But if he's going to put our health at risk just because of his stupid conspiracy theories, like he's not allowed to come over anymore. But that's all fine and good. He can be a real jackass sometimes. Anyway, Melody says, if it wasn't for things like that, shit like polio and smallpox would still be rife. Right? I think there were anti vaxxers even back then, too. Oh, yeah, I was listening to stories. Let's get back to that.
So the drive-through was pretty dead. As I went through this, I had just finished my shift and was on my current way home. I had stopped off at Wendy's to grab a quick bite to eat. It was right around midnight, so the drive-through was pretty dead. As I went through the line, I saw this thing just standing there, watching me from across the parking lot. Not sure what it was, but it looked really tall and skinny, with gangly arms and legs hanging out. It gave me this very uneasy feeling, and I watched it as it turned and walked away over to some shrubbery behind one of those big light poles by the parking lot exit and entrance. I tried not to think too much of it and just drove away. There's just something about what I saw that still really spooked me. I feel very unsettled in my stomach just thinking back to it. As I was getting home from work, I was still shaken up and could not stop thinking about what I saw. So I decided to show my son and daughter, 8 and 10, who were getting ready for bed, about what had rattled me so badly. Not that I could actually show them, but at least tell them. My kids kind of just looked at me like I was crazy, but being kids, I found they would believe me a lot more than my wife would. Then they started telling me about Slender Man, which sounds like it might be what I saw, but I don't know any of these creepypasta characters kids watch nowadays. Could you kindly give me any information on what do you think I saw? And was this paranormal or not? It's one of those nights that I can never forget. I was dispatched to a call about an erratic driver, but it sounded like the call was taken by mistake. There wasn't any description other than suspect operating vehicle erratically, so I figured it must have been for somebody else. When I got up to the area, though, there he was, the suspect himself driving down the road as if nothing had happened. I pulled out after him, trying to get his attention with my sirens and lights, but he didn't budge. Not at all until almost half a mile later when he finally moved over into the right lane, stopped on the shoulder facing me head on. He sat there in his car completely still. I got out of my car with my flashlight and shone it on him. His expression was blank, like he didn't even see me there in front of his car. I didn't want to make any sudden movements in case this guy was dangerous, but at the same time, I felt like he wasn't going to do anything because he stopped himself. So I took a few slow steps toward him, while my other hand hitched over to where my firearm was kept, just behind the small of my back inside a cross straw holster. He still made no movement whatsoever, so I took another step forward, and then thought, this might be the only chance I get. I jumped into his vehicle through the open window, put one hand on his shoulder and another on his head. I tried to pull him out through the window, but it's like he was stuck, like he was glued there. He didn't even try to resist or anything. Then I saw it, this massive gash on the side of his chest, like something straight out of a horror movie. It was deep too,
Damn.
right down to the very bone. Lacerated flesh, flapping in the wind against the jagged edges of exposed ribs, as if somebody had just hacked into him with an axe. It wasn't bleeding, though. In fact, the blood seemed coagulated. It made me think, is he not human at all? There were no other injuries anywhere else on his body either, so it didn't appear to be from some kind of accident. I left the guy sitting there because he was completely unresponsive, but I couldn't find any signs of blood. There were definitely marks on his body, though they all pointed to the same thing. He had clearly been in some sort of hostile situation. I just called this in as a hit and run, left the car where it was, and tried to follow it. I called in an ambulance to get him medical attention. When the ambulance showed up, they too were shocked by his state and surprised by the fact that he was not dead. Although, when checking his vitals, his temperature was 70 degrees, and his blood flow seemed to not be really going much at all, meaning he had very low blood pressure, and his heartbeat was abnormally low. But he was still clearly alive, enough to operate a vehicle.
Damn.
Talk about disturbing. It still really bothers me when thinking back. I mean, how often does this sort of thing happen? And seeing something like that, it really just sticks with you. It's very haunting.
Probably bled out a lot
My name is Officer
before he
T.
started driving.
Williamson, and I am currently an officer in a small town east of Phoenix, Arizona. My encounter involves an online report that I had read from a man who goes by the name of Ken. The report detailed how he and his family have been being harassed by what they believe to be a demon for almost 3 years now. Mr. Ken begins the report by describing the very first encounter he had with this evil entity, which occurred back in the fall of 2013 at their home in Arizona, while nobody else was around except for his wife, who at the time was taking a shower. He explains that out of nowhere, he hears her scream from upstairs, so He runs up there to see what's wrong, only to find her standing there frozen with terror, written all over her face, staring into the nothingness. When he asked her what was wrong, she described a tall, dark figure standing in the corner of their bedroom, right outside of their bathroom door. Mr. Ken claims that when he looked in the same corner, all he saw was a pitch black void where the figure had been standing, which caused this intense feeling of dread to come over him, made him feel as if death were staring him into his very soul. He told his wife there's nothing there, and led her out of the bathroom for fear of her safety, after she clearly voiced concern about going back into the room, and with it still being very present. She had a hard time even going back in there, just turning off the shower. Ken then explains how throughout the next 3 years, this entity would go on to harass the family, manifesting in just about a different form every night. Whether it be the same dark figure, or sometimes this evil looking gnome creature with red eyes. And another time, he claims it appeared as a spirit made of pure fire. He said that although nothing ever physically happened to anybody within the house, everyone has experienced scratch marks, cuts, bruising, all over their bodies for no real reason at all happening at separate times. Ken, too, claims that whatever this thing is loves to stand outside the bathroom door while people are showering, and appears to be immune to things like crosses or crucifixes, or even holy water. Going deeper into the report that I read, it didn't go into too much more detail about this entity, but from what Ken did say, it sounded like this was a type of spirit that takes on the form it believes will frighten its victim the most, a shape-shifting spirit. That being said, if Ken's family has been dealing with one for almost 3 years, I would say they have done very well in keeping whatever this thing was harassing them away from harming anybody. I'm not sure why this thing chose to show itself now after all these years, but maybe something happened recently to make it think attacking them might be possible. And it also makes me wonder whether or not whoever wrote this report actually recorded everything their demon did throughout all the years, and left that stuff out when writing about it, just in case anybody reading it deciding to call them out on their story. I don't think what Ken has been experiencing was either a demon or a Bogart, but an entity that he and his family unintentionally invoked by possibly playing around with some kind of occult paraphernalia, which caused a ritualistic nightmare spirit to cross over from the spirit realm into their home, which they then failed to send back. If this really did go on for 3 years straight, I would say whatever is going on with their house definitely falls under the paranormal category, instead of something rational, like waking up at night and scratching yourself with your eyes still closed because you were dreaming about scratching yourself, when in reality, you were just moving around in your sleep due to maybe a medical condition or maybe even suffering from sleep paralysis. Sometimes, you just have to take people who claim they are being harassed by something invisible with a grain of salt. I mean, even if it is real, there might just be some sort of logical explanation of what's going on that they possibly haven't thought of yet. I was on shift at the county jail and had just gotten off of a patrol shift. My shift was supposed to end at 10, but I did not get off until midnight due to some court hearings that had just gotten out. I figured that I would have to go get something to eat and then hit the showers before going home, since it wasn't worth trying to sleep in a dirty uniform. When everything is said and done, I head down to the lobby so I can clock out and leave after grabbing something quick to eat. There's this big glass window right behind where they make you sign in, so if there's any issue or if we need an update when the day guys are coming in on shift, you can see all over the front desk through said window. I was about halfway through the lobby, my food already paid for and trying to pick up out on something, when I noticed something off in the corner window by the lockers
Knees.
where all of our gear is stored during shift changes.
My knees are cold.
There's this big steel cabinet back there, and is usually locked up pretty good, but is also sort of old. You can tell if somebody has opened it. It sticks a tiny bit at the hinges. Now, I've did more than my fair share of gear for my short career at this point, so I already know what's supposed to be in that closet, just by looking at it. There's two desks, backpacks, tactical vests, and even rifles on occasion. Well, when I saw the cabinet open and the guns were over there instead of over here where they should have been, I got a little concerned.
There we go.
The guys at the front desk heard me asking,
This should keep
who was in the
warm.
locker room? One of them came out to see what was wrong. He checked it out, completely confused by what he knew for a fact that nobody had come in since us day guys started clocking out at this time. We closed up shop, decided to head back down until we could figure things out. I would later find out that my other officers had seen a police officer they did not recognize in there moving things around, which later we would know as the Ghost. But luckily enough, my gun was still in its case, sitting on top of my locker. So if nothing else, nothing was missing for me, personally, which is a huge relief considering each gun gets locked up with its own special key, and there's only like 6 of those in the entire station. I was talking to one of the guys at the front desk about what I'd seen, the ghost, the apparition, but he did not remember anybody coming through for a while, so he went back down together to talk to the night watchman after all this happened. I guess he too has seen this apparition as well. It will come in and move things around, everything from paperwork to equipment. And this is coming from somebody who doesn't believe in ghosts at all. But there's definitely something here. Now, our county jail is pretty small, maybe around 40 cells if I had to guess. But it also has an upper level that houses some offices, and the conference room along with holding cell where you could put somebody before transfer, or just until their court date. The lower floor houses 2 large interview rooms, 6 normal cell blocks, an infirmary that doubles as a psychiatric unit, and then our holding area for everybody else that needs to stay the night. I had gone up there with our main dispatcher and her assistant after talking to the guys at the front desk. Every single door was locked like they should have been, aside from one solitary cell that houses an older woman who'd been picked up for public intoxication just earlier that evening. That just made no sense whatsoever. Of course, unless she escaped. And I have no idea because it would take quite a struggle to break out of those doors, since we're talking about solid steel. The cells also have 2 deadbolts on top, both being locked, so you have to do 3 things prior to breaking through all of them, which is nearly impossible if unarmed or alone, unless you can pick locks. The cops that were there at the time had gone through just about every inch of this place, coming up with virtually nothing, which is extremely strange. We're a very small team, and we could usually get a pretty good bead on these things before it gets too far.
Sweet.
It was only the 3 of us after all, and we made sure to check out everything together in case something or somebody had slipped by. We even went over our entire walkie-talkie system, just to make sure there was nothing going on. But we were also noticing we were having a lot of static issues, which is very unusual. The air felt very electric-y, lots of magneticism in the air. Again, very unusual. And from the watchman, he always explained how the air would seem to change every time he would see this thing on the cameras, this officer ghost. But after searching for what seemed like hours, we decided to head back down and see if maybe something else had popped up, or perhaps there'd be some kind of clue lying around, somewhere, that could explain all of this without having to call in everybody else just yet. It seemed that maybe this was an inside job. I'm also trying to think rationally here and not immediately go to ghosts. The only people who had access to that room were either on shift or had clocked out at this point. But it doesn't explain why somebody would take or move our stuff and then not bother using it for whatever they wanted to do with it. I don't know if you've ever worked with law enforcement before, but having guns missing is a really bad thing. If they fell into the wrong hands, there's literally nothing stopping them from being used against anybody, including our other officers. Our vests are also equipped with Kevlar plates, despite how light they may be, so those could seriously injure or even kill somebody, which, again, is an extreme risk, since most of us carry them around everywhere we go. I tried talking to the watchman again, who didn't remember anybody else coming in, but informed me that on camera, he saw the figure multiple times this evening. I just couldn't buy it though. If you know anything about our tiny town, you might know we don't have a ton going on, especially at night, which is why most people end up getting bored
Gotta pull up
and
these
find
reference
crime to
sheets.
commit. Even officers have a struggle of keeping responsibility, or they can't handle the stress that comes on with law enforcement. I hate watering the idea of this entire thing down to a silly ghost or apparition, or even acknowledging the fact that this police station is haunted. But maybe it's time to open my mind. The night watchman, a good friend of mine, is a no nonsense kind of guy. He wouldn't make this stuff up. I don't know if he really believes in ghosts, but he's definitely seeing something on the cameras that isn't quite human. I have family in law enforcement, and I found these old archive files. Well, my grandfather did, because he has access to documents. And this is an old printout of something that I found very interesting. So I thought I would share it with you. Here you go. May 22nd, 1984. Officer LG was patrolling the area around a local park during the night shift. At approximately 1:25 a.m., the officer reported veering off course to investigate flashing lights in an adjacent wooded section of the city, spotting several bright lights slowly hovering along the tree line. As he drove closer to investigate, his vehicle reportedly lost power and stalled as he approached an object described as having a dark body with many bright lights, which hovered silently above him, roughly 300 feet. The object allegedly reeled out some type of thin black cord which struck and wrapped around his police car as it backed away from him, taking off into the air and disappearing into darkness. Officer LG wrote his account of the event on May 24th, 1984. The following day, he reported the incident to command, who denied anything had happened and insisted that his vehicle was in perfect working order. Officer LG's police cruiser was inspected by technicians at the city garage, who found nothing wrong with it mechanically. No evidence of alterations or unusual damage were made. Note after inspection. No support for Officer LG's claim would come from local authorities until 3 months later, when another officer, AF, called into dispatch reporting a very similar object near the same park, along with reports of several other officers who had also spotted all lights descending toward a tree line, then vanishing without explanation. Thereafter, Officer AF, Officer LG, was reportedly ridiculed by command to stop spreading rumors, ultimately being permanently dismissed from duty. The officer involved in this story goes by the name of Officer Michael Frankton, currently stationed at the 14th Precinct. So, one night, about 2 months ago, he was sent to investigate a call of an animal trying to break into a house on the west side of town. The caller
Wake up.
reported that they were not sure what it
Wake up,
was,
Black Horse.
that it looked like some sort of large skeletal animal.
I can't.
When he
I
got
don't
there and
want
searched
to.
around the perimeter, he found no tracks or trace or evidence that would suggest any person or animal had actually come close to entering or tearing into the property. After entering into the home, which seemed completely normal, everything was closed up and locked, as if nobody was there. He even searched all around inside, just to make sure nothing had gotten in. He exited the house and walked around to check the perimeter again before his radio started going off, notifying him that the officers had arrived on the east side of property, where he would be able to help them with an animal control call. When he approached them, he told them that there was this large creature that looked like it might have been injured, hence the skeleton exposure, and that this animal had possibly escaped and was injured, and now darting all over the property. They brought Officer F back around to where the animal was initially sighted. Right up ahead of them was what they could best describe as something straight out of hell itself. It seemed almost like a hulking mass of rotting flesh and bone, and had this terrible odor of rotting meat and death. In the officer's words himself, he said that this thing looked like a real-life horror movie prop from an undead movie, but was actually moving around. It had long arms and massive claws at the end of each finger. It was staring into their eyes with an abnormally large mouth split open, as if it was not trying to bare any of its teeth at all. The officers all fled the scene, while this being began running alongside the cruiser, trying to keep up with them. Any other information about this night was blotted out and classified. Little is known about what happened to Michael F., or his current whereabouts, or if he is even serving still as a police officer. If you would like your own police encounter stories to be featured on this post, please use the submission form available. We look forward to hearing more stories.
Oh, what? Is it done? No.
Folks,
No. Oh, man. All that stew. I again served myself a pretty hearty bowl of this mutton stew, which is like a lot more than I'm usually capable of because my stomach is shrunk so much. But the stew is so good. I was thinking, like, you know what? This stew is freaking awesome. I'm going to go ahead and serve myself a full bowl of this stew. And then I had it with some of like a piece of the leftover yeast bread we still got. It's fucking delicious. But now I'm like running the risk of slipping into a food coma. Mm, just want to lay down and let all this food settle. But got to finish these last 2 hours for the day. Okay, let's get back to it.
I know this might be hard to believe, but
Oh,
it's what I've gone through. I had just finished up with a traffic stop one night where all I found was an expired registration on a car, which did not match the plates. So I let them off without warning, went back to my cruiser to call in dispatch before returning to patrol. This being said, I should have been able to see everything in front of me as clear as day, even though it was wintertime and where all the trees had lost their leaves, so visibility shouldn't have been too much of an issue. My headlights illuminated almost anything within 100 yards or so, but sometimes things can hide in the shadows of those yards. I noticed something out of my peripheral vision. This is right as I was on the phone with dispatch, so I immediately cut off dispatch and began slowly driving towards where I saw whatever it was, thinking it was a person up to no good. But then I saw that it moved slowly and had a long, fluid stride, despite having no leaves. It seemed to blend in with the surroundings enough that you could just barely make out what it looked like. I saw a large head, two long ears and horns, dark, deep eye sockets that appeared almost hollow, taken up by most of my headlights' illumination by this point. I felt like Alice chasing after whatever Alice chased after into Wonderland, except without all the
a
trippiness
rabbit?
and trying to find an exit.
She chased a
Except
white
this
rabbit?
time, it was the one chasing after me. I sped up a bit and tried to keep it in sight, but as I got closer, it suddenly crouched down, and I lost sight of it. The more I go into detail about this experience, the deeper things get. Just know that there was no car for it to have gotten into or jump over any fence. So, where did it go? Whatever it was. But as soon as you stop asking questions is when they get answered. So, I slowly circled around the same 100 yards again, searching for anything unusual with my high beams on full illumination. It must have been hiding from me somehow. There was nothing except a few stray cats darting behind some trash cans on the other side of the street. I jumped some bushes and parked cars. Still nothing. So, I start to just go back on duty, probably looking like a crazy officer driving around aimlessly for no reason. But that's what we do sometimes in this job. You just never know when something is going to pop out. So, better to be safe than sorry. I'm about halfway down the block towards my car when suddenly, up ahead of me, which is now being obstructed by tall grass, I see it again. It had been crouched down again, but its head was now tilted upward at an angle directly towards me. and its mouth was wide open. There were no teeth visible that I could recall, and it did not appear to be making any sounds. It would only remain in that position for a few seconds. Then, it would slowly move from side to side before.
Hold on. Oh, that's a truck. Oh, God. Oh, oh. Knock it off, Black Horse. Wake up. Grab a brush and put a little makeup. Hide the scars to fade away the shakeup. Why'd you leave the keys upon the table? Here you go, create another fable. I don't think you trust in my self-righteous suicide. I cry when angels deserve to die. Okay.
Standing back up on its two legs. It was at least 10 yards away from me, so I did the sensible thing, which was to get back into my car, lock the doors. But it just stood there looking at me for a few seconds, until going back.
Oh. Melody's saying, Floof is having much regrets. Yes, I am. I ate so much. So full. But the fucking stew is so good. Oh, and there's still some left over, so I'm looking forward to having more of it. Melody goes on to say, has you mentioned bacon and sausage stuffing yet? Yes, I have. And I went ahead and bought the supplies yesterday. Mm, mm, mm. And my dad got his holiday turkey for Thanksgiving yesterday. I swung by and picked that up from him. And we're letting it thaw out today. And then we're going to start baking it. Or not baking it. Is it baking? Yeah, I guess, yeah. We're going to start cooking it tomorrow. And yeah, I got the bacon. And instead of like doing like the sausage links where you like cut it open and take out the insides, I just got the big old sausage log. So we're just going to open that up and like mix it in with all the stuffing stuff and then bake that too. Yeah, I got several packs of bacon for the other stuffing. Ah, Jeebus Crunch cereal, man. I'm crashing. But this happened like the couple of days before, like where I was like falling asleep at the wheel, but eventually, yeah, it's gonna happen again. Eventually, I get my second wind, and I just keep drawing. Melody says, "Go stand outside for a few minutes. The cold will wake you up." No, I'm the opposite. It's like if I get cold, then like I'll just want to like curl up and go to sleep. I don't know why. Like I don't know how cold air like gets people to wake up, but for me, cold air just makes me sleepy. Now, if it was warm air, like if it was like kind of like hot and humid in here, like I'd be awake because like being too warm just kind of keeps me up. Heat keeps me awake, and I know for other people that's the opposite. Like when they feel warm, they feel like they feel like they want to take a nap. Melody says baking or roasting. Yeah, roasting. Baking and roasting. Excuse me. Come on, second wind. Let's go. Just waiting for that second wind to kick in so I can stop yawning and wanting to go to sleep. Gotta get up. I gotta get going. I'm gonna see a friend of mine. He's round and he's fuzzy. I love him because he's Pooh Bear, Winnie the Pooh Bear. Oh bother. Hello, Piglet. Am I getting better at that? Is my Pooh voice like becoming more recognizable as Pooh? Melody says you have to let me know what the family think of my two stuffings. Oh, I will. We'll definitely let you know. The fuck? What was that? Okay, not sure what that was. Like it's like something slipped off the table and fell onto the floor, but there's nothing there. There's nothing there but some wires. Maybe I guess it was one of the wires that came down, but oh, okay, yeah. It's that USB. It's my printer's USB. Melody says, "You know me, I love sub-zero temperatures." Sweet. I love sleeping in cold weather, except if I have a cold. If I have a cold, then I do my best to just sweat it out. Like even though I don't like sleeping when I'm hot, I'll just do what I can to really bundle up and take a nap while it's like nice and warm, so I can just sweat out whatever cold is freaking attacking my system. But yeah, besides like having a cold, I like sleeping in the cold. Mm. There's nothing like a comforting slight hypothermia to lull you to sleep. Melody says 1 hour 50 minutes. Yes, 1 hour and 15 minutes left. Gives me an hour for my second wind to kick in. Oh, back to the stories. Oh, okay.
Behind some other parked cars, trying to keep out of sight. I don't know what it wanted with me, but if you have watched any cop show or horror movie ever, you probably could have guessed what happened next. I got out of my vehicle, drew my firearm. I'm smart enough to realize that shooting them never works anyway. But as I was about to approach the spot where it had been standing, it suddenly appeared in front of me, stopped and stared at me. And dang it, this thing was fast. It did not make any noise, but its wide open gaping mouth, which now I could see contained what looked like rows of jagged teeth, glistening with drool. Then it runs away from me again. I followed right behind it. At this point, I just really wanted to know what this thing was. So forget being scared. I probably should have just gone back into my car for that hour or two remaining of my shift. But there's a reason why they call that being stupid. Anyway, so I'm chasing after whatever it was, and I'm running pretty fast, but not jumping over anything. This thing was fast, like Usain Bolt fast. It did not even run in a straight line when it ran away from me. It would just kind of weave in and out of any obstacle in front of it, which consistently, mostly parked cars or trash at the time. But when you move so much while trying to evade capture, eventually you're going to fall down. Your legs can only take you so far before they get tired. That's what I think happened in this thing. It seemed to collapse on something that was invisible in my headlights, and then pulls itself back up, which I'm not sure if it tripped or why it collapsed. Maybe it was feigning death, I don't know. But as soon as it pulled itself back up, it runs into a nearby backyard, which made sense. I mean, all the streets had been blocked off at this point. So I'm going chasing after it, through the same gate that is still wide open in the fence. And to my horror, I see another similar creature on my left, staring right at me, like an idiot, while not making any noise. It too was crouched down,
Yes,
like
I might have
something
a
out of a
snooze after
prehistoric
this.
Paleo exhibit. Its mouth agape, but I couldn't see any teeth, and I couldn't help but notice that this one had very large eyes, much larger than the other one,
Whoa.
almost like a child or a baby compared to an adult.
Just got
And then
dizzy all
another
of a sudden.
creature just took off running while I was still trying to figure out if this creature was real or not, or was I simply running after a nightmare? And then a smaller one jumps right in front of me. Out of reaction, I shoot this one point blank in the chest several times,
Boom,
which
boom.
my gun did not even seem to phase it. It kept on running towards me, and I panicked at this point, despite my training. I'm now thinking that this is some kind of demon. I did not even bother shooting at it again. The first few shots seemed to have no effect, so instead of wasting bullets, I pulled out my taser and tased whatever it was, expecting it to fall over. But it did not even react. The taser did nothing. Unsure of what to do at this point, I do the only thing I know I can do: run. This creature and
Shit
the other two
myself.
gave chase, following quickly behind each other. I made it back to my cruiser and flew out of there. And since this night, I have never seen or dealt with such a creature, but I believe that this was something that had come from deep in the pits of hell. And I know these things are very real.
Deep from the pits of your mom.
I'm 52 and have lived in the US now for 12 years. Forgive me if my English isn't the best.
Your
It's not
English
my first
sucks.
language. I lived in Puerto Rico most of my life, and even served as law enforcement there for about 8 years. I know what I saw, so here goes. I remember it being a Sunday night, a couple days before the arrival of Hurricane Maria to the island. I was patrolling my tour alone. Everybody else was sent home early, due to the approaching hurricane conditions. The weather that night wasn't anything special, just very cloudy, with some rain. I had heard on multiple occasions about chupacabra sightings in Puerto Rico, especially around the rainforest, which is right where I was during that time. One elderly neighbor lady said she had actually encountered one when she stayed late at work one night, apparently running out of gas. She claimed it looked like a small person with spikes all down its back, red glowing eyes, and large fangs.
Good idea, love.
She said it chased
I'm
after
gonna
her,
do some
and she
exercises.
had to get into her car and try to
That'll
get
wake me
away,
back up.
even though she just barely had enough gas to do it. Just a fair warning: what I'm about to describe isn't pleasant, so be warned. It was around 1:30 a.m., and I just passed a local river when a thing walked right by the road. It actually popped its head up. It didn't even try to hide or anything. At first glance, I didn't know what it was, and I thought maybe it was a small animal. But as soon as it fully turned and looked into my headlights and hissed, you could see what it was: chupacabra. Very skinny, spines down its back, large red eyes, very pale skin, and sharp teeth and fangs. It was the red eyes, though, that ultimately gave him away before I saw the rest of his body. Those eyes are so bright, they could pierce the darkness of the night, even through my headlights. This might sound silly to you, but at that point, I froze and felt something was wrong, especially when he hissed at me like some kind of rabid wild animal. Also, it's important to know that most Puerto Rican people are very religious. So if somebody is walking around out there and they see this thing, chances are they're going to think it's a demon or something from the realm of hell. There was no doubt about it in my mind that night that what I was seeing was a chupacabra. He disappeared soon after. This has been one of the most frightening experiences I've ever had on the job, and I've never seen or heard of such a thing here on American soil. Thank you for taking the time to read. New York State is known for some pretty crazy things, from alligators in basements to criminals hiding behind trees. But I've had some pretty strange run ins myself. I'll be telling you about my most interesting encounter yet. About a year ago, while on duty at a local town overnight for training, myself and another officer were dispatched to a local residence for a report of an elderly woman who went missing while hiking with her dog out on her own property. She was sitting on roughly 80 acres of land and couldn't have gone far. The person reporting was her son. He said that she hadn't been there since later that afternoon, when she set out with the dog towards the edge of the property, right near the swamp area by their house. It would have been odd to just send 2 officers on such a call, but due to our small force size, we were using 1 car on solo nights to provide better coverage across town. Upon arriving on scene, we met with the son who led us down where his mother was last seen. He told us he found her phone by their mailbox, which appeared that she had talked to her son for a little while, but after setting out, had mentioned something about going towards the swamp, as there were some wildflowers that have bloomed this time of year. This is why we had been dispatched as well. It also seemed like a good spot for bears, so we had to evaluate all the potential dangers. However, knowing how well populated our area was, not everybody always carried bear spray, but we did, so we could cover more ground efficiently, and also ensure safely if we came across any potentially dangerous wildlife. We walked for about 30 minutes, following the path around to where I thought she may have gone towards. However, after walking for a little while longer, nothing turned up. We then decided to double pack and try walking along another path that branched off one of the ones we were walking on to see if that would turn up anything. Any evidence at all
Thank you,
that
Mel.
she had been here. While walking
I
down this
forgot
other
that's
path
what I did
at
last
first,
time to
it seemed like there was nothing out of the
wake myself
ordinary.
up.
But again, no sign of her dog or any tracks leading to the brush, either finishing or
Marcus
somewhere
says,
else.
hustle those hibernating hamstrings.
This is when I began getting nervous.
Yes.
Because between myself and my partner, we could not find her or find any traces of her. Something must have happened to her since she left home earlier in the afternoon. As we kept going further and further, we began hearing odd noises in the distance. While I felt that we were safe at first, we both came to a sudden stop. These sounds were like nothing I've heard before, at least not on this side of the country. But it did not sound like any animal or person. I could not identify it. "Did you hear that?" my partner had said to me, as he looked towards the source of the howl. At this point, my heart was racing out of fear and curiosity, wanting more than anything for this night to end and for us to get back safely. I told him yes, as my hands began to tremble slightly from both nervousness and adrenaline. The hair on my arms were standing and raising. I felt goosebumps beginning to form. We then slowly began moving towards where the howl had come from. Both myself and my partner keeping our flashlights out, just in case whatever made that noise was anything dangerous. We walked for another minute or so until we got closer and closer. Still no sign of any dog tracks or even footprints. Nothing leading up to this noise or away from it. My heart began pounding out of my chest when we came within about 30 feet of the origin of the sound, which had stopped by now after hearing us get closer. And then suddenly, without warning, an odd orb-like light appeared not too far above our heads, making us feel instantly nauseous. "What is that?" I remember saying, as I raised my flashlight to see what it was. But then just as quickly as it appeared, it vanished. My partner and myself both looked towards where the light disappeared, after hearing a rustle from behind us, not too far away from where we were standing up until now. He whispered that we needed to get out of here. This wasn't right. But his voice was quivered, which was strange and caught my attention. And this was a partner who was always very calm, no matter how scary or dangerous the situation was. We had been working together for years. However, this time he sounded scared, almost as if something else was out there, other than us. We began walking back towards where we came from for a while I kept my light out in front of me, just to make sure nothing was going to jump out. All the while, we had been hearing strange sounds that sometimes sounded like a human, but not fully, at least not having the cadence of a person. It was more animalistic. He would ask me again if I heard that, and I told him yes. He was getting more and more scared, even though his exterior was seemingly calm. We slowly started walking back towards where we came from, where the sounds became louder and louder. This made it difficult to continue without completely freaking out on one another. Then, out of nowhere, the one sound that instantly made me stop in my tracks was the sound of some kind of human or cry from not too far away. He whispered, "Shh," to me as he looked at me with his eyes, almost piercing right through mine. Well, I couldn't tell what it was. Something compelled me to move forward so we could see what was making these strange sounds around us, which led us here in the first place. Wait, no, come back. We shouldn't be going out this far, he had explained to me. But even though he seemed very insistent about us going back the way we came from, I couldn't bring myself to stay quiet and just go while we could still hear all these strange noises where we were. And so while he was busy whispering to me about how we should leave, I began walking towards where it sounded like this noise was coming from, which only made him try and stop me even more.
Oh,
We
no,
both
it says,
proceeded
did
to
it
go
help?
deeper
Yes,
into
it
the
did.
woods,
Mission
but the
accomplished
sound
then
of
for the
whatever we had
final hour
heard
push.
was now
Just
gone.
over an hour to
There was
go.
silence. In
Sweet.
fact, the night itself was now silent. The crickets, all nightlife, had gone completely dead. But the inside of my mind was going crazy, trying to figure out what was going on. What were those strange cries and noises? What were the bright lights that appeared overhead? But here's one of the strange parts. At some point, him and I lost each other, which I don't know how it's even possible because we were walking within 5 to 10 feet of one another. I hear him whispering into his radio, trying to contact me, but our radio communication was very fizzy, and somehow we had gotten separated. "Joe, come in. Joe, are you out there?" He kept saying over and over again, as I could hear what he was saying, as if he was standing right next to me, even though we couldn't see each other at all. And as we're struggling in this disarray of a mess, this extremely bright white light shines from the sky as if an asteroid had exploded up in the atmosphere, lighting up the entire night sky, enveloping me, and I assume my partner, in this white consuming light. And the next thing you know, we're back at the front of the property, and it's morning time, with the sun rising, and the mom is sitting on her front porch with her dog, drinking coffee. She sees us and is immediately surprised. Me and my partner are kind of looking at each other, freaking out, trying to mentally comprehend everything and anything that has just happened, feeling ourselves in our own heads and bodies, making sure we're not dead or dreaming. "What just happened?" I remember asking. When the lady comes over to us and begins asking questions like, "Where did you guys come from? Why are you here?" We began asking her questions in retort. Her name. Was she aware that she was missing? She seemed to have no knowledge of her ever missing. And when checking the date and time, it had been about 14 hours the following morning. My partner and I can both vouch for this happening. I'll spare you all the minute details, but long story short, after we had gotten separated by this very thick darkness, we were both enveloped in white light, and somehow pushed through about 14 hours of time, and also placed in the front of the property. At the time of this happening to us, it was roughly 8:36 p.m. at night, and we were no more than 3/4 of a mile away from the house. The woman who had been reported missing also showed no signs of ever being hurt or recollection she was ever missing in the first place. We did not report this, as we have no logical way to explain anything that happened to us. My name is, well, you can call me Officer Brian. I work for a mid-sized police department in the outskirts of New York City. Myself and my partner have come across what we assume was a gugway while on patrol one night after being called to a persisting issue with teenagers at an old abandoned warehouse right near the woods. The incident happened about 3 years ago
Places,
now,
then you can enjoy your
so
food
some of the
calmly.
details are foggy,
After I'm done here.
but I remember for
Sweet.
the most part exactly how it went. My partner and I arrived at the old warehouse to be greeted by a decent sized group of rowdy teenagers. They were apparently having some party in there, but it was pretty clear that they got freaked out when we showed up. Everybody fled. My partner insisted that we go inside to check it out, which I thought was dumb because there was no way I was going on that place. Once we became aware of the situation, we also left. Not a minute after we got onto the main road did my partner get called to another call about an incident near a small farm outside of town. Before arriving, he told me that there had been a number of missing persons cases in all the nearby area. They were all adults. When we first arrived at the farmhouse, it was clear something really wrong had gone on there. The wife of the man who lived there was crying in the arms of a paramedic, and we were told by another officer there that she had discovered her husband's remains, his mangled corpse in the barn, when she opened it up to feed their pigs. I was disgusted
Damn.
and confused. I couldn't figure out how something so violent could happen with anybody. After getting escorted to the barn, I couldn't believe how wrong I was. The man who lived there was a pretty big guy, in his mid 50s, and the way he looked now made me wonder if he'd put up a fight at all. He was badly mangled. I won't get into the details, other than
Aw.
his spine sticking out and
Ooh.
his head twisted around.
Fuck.
I had a difficult time getting a hold of myself while trying to talk to the wife of this man, who was mutilated right there. After prying with some questions, she eventually revealed that her husband went to check out on some pigs earlier in the night, but never came back. I wondered if he was taken or eaten by his pigs, since they were acting very strange. I knew deep down, though, that this wasn't done from a pig. This was from something else. I asked her what made her go out there, and she said it was because she heard snarling noises, and it sounded very out of place. Her husband had not come back either. She went on to say that she had heard these sounds before, but never paid much attention to them, that she had been hearing them a few days prior to this going on. I took her inside after convincing her I was sure everything would be fine. Meanwhile, my partner stayed behind with the other officers and assessed the scene while also having a look around the area for anybody or anything that could have had a connection or cause to this incident. One thing that really bothered me was that none of the other officers seemed to be concerned with the noises that I had heard. They didn't think it was connected to the man's death, but I knew better than anybody how violent and strange this was. I couldn't shake off what his wife had said about hearing those noises. This was the only thing I needed to keep looking into this. No one believed me. They said I was too new and didn't really know what I was doing. I'm still extremely disturbed by this whole incident. If you have any information on what happened, or think you might know, I would love to hear your opinion. Greetings. I hate to be a bother, but I have a story to tell. Please, do not think my mind is going from the many stories you all hear. Bear with me that this is very hard for me to do, although I believe it needs to be said. Last summer, on July 4th,
I take my
2017,
morning meds.
around 10 p.m. at night, I was driving home from my family cookout late at night. I was also off duty. It was about 11 p.m. near the swamps by this point, and I live in Gulfport, Mississippi. What I saw, a figure up ahead on the side of the road, caught my attention. As I got closer, what I thought was a normal man, I soon realized that this was not the case. It stood over 8 feet tall, long legs and arms that reached down below its knees. It had dark scales all over its body, but most notable were its hands, which hosted 4 fingers, each with long claws. The most bizarre thing, though, was its head, which appeared more like an iguana or a dinosaur than a human being. Upon seeing this strange creature, I slammed on my brakes in total shock, not knowing what to make of what I was looking at. It didn't take long, though, before it became aware of my presence, as it quickly turned its head, looking directly at me, glowing yellow eyes, and some sort of light that seemed to emit from within its skull. It then began walking towards my vehicle, as if trying to scare me or intimidate me to leave. In a panic, I reached for my gun, which was on the seat next to me, quickly aiming it at the creature's head, not knowing if shooting this thing would kill it or not, but wanting to stop whatever this thing was, in hopes it would just leave. As soon as I took aim, this thing let out a nasty growl and came rushing at me with great speed. Seeing this thing moving so quick, I was overwhelmed with fear, slamming my foot on the gas as fast as I could. The last thing I remember is seeing in my rearview mirror if it was going to give chase, but instead it just turned around and kept going back into the marsh. I don't know how long it took me to get home that night, but all I knew is at the time, whatever the creature was, Satan himself couldn't have been any more evil looking. I went home immediately after, told my family what had happened. Of course, my wife, they didn't believe a word of it. There were no tracks or anything else to prove the encounter ever happened. However, about a week went by, and I could swear I smelt that same deathly stench coming from the swamps when I drove by again, but no sign of it, so I just dismissed it all, thinking it was a trick being played by my mind. I've watched a couple of your encounters on your YouTube, hoping to find any proof of anything that might explain what happened to me that night, but after a while, you just learn to let it go, until this past spring, when one of our own deputies told me he had an encounter with one of these creatures in the swamps himself back in 2015. He said that he had seen something covered in mud, running through the brush, trying to hide, only then to turn its head at him before turning around and disappearing into thin air. He also said that shortly after seeing whatever this thing was, his cruiser's engine gave out along with metal bending, and that he had to have the thing towed back into town. I don't know if there's any truth to what we saw, but I'm not taking my chances, and will pray every night before going to sleep for the Lord and Savior to keep me safe from whatever we might have encountered out there in the swamps. I was a beat officer for a small town in northern New Jersey. The chief of police at the time was a guy well known to me and my brothers in the force as Mr. Paranoid himself. One night, I responded to a call from dispatch that there had been reports of screaming from the woods near Greenwood Lake. I arrived at the location and didn't see anything, but a foul smell hung in the air. It smelled like blood and wet dog and iron. I entered the woods on foot with my flashlight, ready to catch any pranksters or anybody who was fooling around, listening intently for any sign of life as I made my way deeper in the woods. Something suddenly darted out from a clump of trees to my right, tearing off into the woods. I chased after them, or it, as best I could, but there's no way I could ever catch up to them. A few weeks later, a young boy had gone missing from his family's campsite around the same location. The search party had come up empty handed, but I knew that area was where I had seen whatever it was that night, what I assumed was a large animal. The chief of police during an investigation took me aside and told me not to talk about what I saw around town. He stated that he didn't want to cause panic in the small town, so he never reported his encounter or description of what happened at Greenwood. We weren't able to find any missing persons matching the description. We're also unable to find the location of where this other officer believed that he himself saw a werewolf. I did see one, though, claiming to be an unnamed officer, who have also been on the search party for the missing boy, but they have since been let go. April 2008. At the time, I was an officer with the City of the Moore Police Department. It was around 11, and my partner and I were patrolling near the area around
Notice
Northwest
there's
and
no
Peachtree,
shame in calling it early and just
responding to several
fabricating the
calls of
finish time.
screams in an abandoned meat packaging plant. This plant had closed down
Or I
about
could
20
just
years
like
earlier.
let the time run
We never found
and just
anything, but
friggin'
thought
dink
it could have just
around
been
the rest of
teenagers
the
trying to get in
hour.
trouble. After we investigated all around the plant, not finding anything, we headed back, getting ready to close up the investigation. As we're walking back up, we noticed something large moving behind a chain link fence. Pulling on our flashlights,
I
pointing
love
it
you,
toward where we
babes.
saw movement. That's when we saw it. It jumped off one of the walls on top of the buildings, crouching down, looking at us. It did not look like any animal known here on Earth. It had dark grayish skin with large black eyes, small fangs sticking out of its mouth, and this white hair running down its jawline with muscular arms almost touching the ground. It looked like a cross between a bat and a human, and it quickly turned, jumping off the building onto another, running across it and disappearing over a large stack of old wooden planks. My partner looked at me like I was crazy when I told him what I saw. He said it couldn't be real, and that I was pranking him. But when we got back in our cars, ready to leave, we noticed there was also a small hole in the fencing where something had apparently tried to dig into the ground underneath. And as we drove out there, my partner just seemed to get lost somewhere between his thoughts and fear while looking to me for answers. We searched the perimeter and the surrounding area more, but finding nothing ultimately, continuing on with our shift. After we were off duty, we went to O'Malley's Bar and Grill, about an hour away, near Norman, Oklahoma, and we had a few drinks. Not sure if it was the liquor speaking, but as we talked more after a few beers, he admitted that he had saw the same thing to me just before I called him over to help. He tells me that it reminded him of this vampire entity that would visit him as a child every night and terrify him. He claims it would jump from his closet into his bedroom, growl at him, threaten to hurt him and his family. He then describes the same look we saw that night at the plant, dark gray skin and fangs, but he still denies that this thing was real and that it didn't even exist. When we finished up our beers, we went back to Moore and started our normal routine. This is something that will always stick with me. May of 1985. We were dispatched to a rural area of Placer County, California, investigating some possible dog or livestock killings. The crime was that the owners found their dogs dead in the backyard, and one of their goats was taken from the pen and killed, pulled apart, like a piece of chicken. What was strange about this is that any animal abducting goats or hens would generally eat on them, not take their prey and pull them apart and leave the body. When we got there at first, we saw nothing, but when we began to walk around by our cars,
Fucking
we could hear
stream.
something breathing pretty heavily, like it was running and getting closer. So we walked around some more and could see what looked like a little person
Reconnect, damn
hiding
you.
behind two trees just about 50 yards out, looking at us. My partner actually recognized it at first, that it looked like a human face, or maybe a child, but with glowing eyes, crouching down and covered in hair. Then it crouched down to all fours and ran away into another tree. I was already shooting at it with my 9mm. It did not move like a human, but like that of an animal. That is when it came out of the tree and was on top of me. The rest of the incident is kind of blurry. However, I do know that nobody could find the bullet casings or even see what I had been firing my weapon. I then took them to where the creature was standing when it ran across the road. They still could find nothing. The people who worked on the case were stunned by what happened. One man said he would later go back there again if need be. He also claimed that he had been feeling something evil in the area for a while now. Take that as far as you want.
Okay. Stop streaming. Start streaming. You motherfucker. Am I gonna have to start recording too? God damn it.